Hello, and welcome to In the Court of the Wenton Knave, the Sabbath Knave. Heaven and Hell, sorry. Heaven and Hell, because this actually blocks off the name of the album. Sadly, I've only got the deluxe edition. I did have the first one I heard was the original Castle release, and I did have the Castle remaster and foolishly gave that away. Every time I replaced the CD, I used to just give away the old one, which was stupid, which I've stopped doing. So here's the deluxe edition anyway, with some random live stuff. Having complete shows, thanks. Yeah, the next album after Never Say Die. Mind-blowingly so. A seminal moment, etc. You know, Tony Iommi regards this and Sabbath Bloody Sabbath as the best moments in the catalogue. May well be true. And obviously, in retrospect, it's more generic than Never Say Die. And certainly more generic than Sabbath Bloody Sabbath. Partially because it's so influential, partially because, well, it is. It's very much hard rock. There is no filler, although there are definitely no good songs and really, really, really good songs. There's probably two songs which are only good songs, maybe. You know, the progginess has gone completely. And it had to. It had to. You know, if they want to be really, really successful, that's what they had to do. Obviously, I would have preferred a sort of Heaven and Hell and Don Airy. You know, with all the instrumentally bits and stuff, but we know that wasn't possible given what Don was doing, obviously. It makes sense. And this is a commercial move. Not only is it a bloody good album which was actually made very naturally, it is also a commercial move. Last record on contract. They had been written off. It had to be really good and really commercial. They needed hit singles. You know, that's what happens when bands, they need a hit single at the start and then they don't need hit singles, but then when the sales trail off, they need the publicity of a hit single to get the kids. They need new fans, basically. That's what it is. You know, unfortunately, obviously, the Nawabum media machine is in full swing with, you know, the mainstream media having to admit that people like rock music again. They never stopped liking rock music. They just pretended they didn't like it. But you know, and obviously, the Nawabum movement, the established bands were the ones that took the lion's share of that movement. Really, this album is a collaboration. This is the big thing, you know, and you know, it is an Iommi Dio album superficially. Definitely the main contributions are those two guys, and that's a different thing to traditional Sabbath, controversial. But also Jeff Nichols came from the band Quartz. They were friends with the band for years and years and years. They're from Brum, so you know. He was brought in on second guitar, so the plan was to have a second guitarist. That was the thing of the time. You know, Judas Priest were big and doing much the same thing at the same time, and the Thin Lizzy thing and all that. Rock bands tended to have two guitars now because they wanted a less subtle sound. They want the guitars, and obviously it stops when someone solos. So you want a rhythm guitarist, and you know, two people just soloing and taking it in turns would have seemed silly and crass in the 70s. Now seems cool and show-offy in the shallow 80s, maybe. He also wrote some key moments, Jeff Nichols, so that's quite important. This seems to be a thing with Tony Iommi and his trust. There's a trust thing. You know, there's an argument. You know, the reason that Ozzy had to go, you know, the trust was lost because he left the first time he left. But this guy seemed reliable. He knew him quite well. You know, and he was staying in the band for 25 years. So, you know, although some of that in the band was behind the speaker stack, and some of it wasn't. Some of it was writing. Some of it was no. You're just the keyboard player making the sound effects. Stand behind the amps. We also know Geezer was present for writing 3 of the songs on here. So that does mean he must have contributed something to those. Other than that, he contributed to performance. And that's the thing. Everyone involved has made it clear that this was really a band effort. It was a collaboration. It's likely, you know, difficult to attribute credit accurately. To credit everybody involved would have been unfair mostly to Iommi and Dio. But to credit Iommi, Butler, Dio is also completely unfair because Jeff Nichols. And that takes nothing away from the obvious contributions. It is mostly Ronnie and Tony. We know that. That's probably why magic happened. You know, they were a band. They were down in the doldrums, and they were, you know, here to prove something. And Ronnie also had to prove something, probably. And that's the secret. You know, nobody's special. Though there's 2 big writers in the band, nobody's special. If someone makes a suggestion, it's a good idea. It's a good idea. It's not like I write the songs. I'm the hero. I'm the big name, because none of that means anything. Even if you're one of the best singers in the world, or the best guitarists in the world, etc. Is it Black Sabbath? Yes, because it says Black Sabbath there. That is all that means. It really, yeah. The DNA is there, definitely, of Sabbath, but a huge amount of the input is from Dio, and that's a style he developed with Rainbow. And it is one of those things, that combination works so perfectly on this album. It probably works better in terms of the combination of those styles, not the combination of the individuals. Better than Ozzy, in a sense. We're very short-lived, though. From a production perspective, on the one hand it's perfect, it's traditional 8 tracks, it has been produced in that sense perfectly. They kept the songs at the rock length of 5 minutes. You know, I mean, Heaven and Hell was supposed to be about 8 minutes and they trimmed it, sadly. We've never heard the studio version of that. Obviously that makes it work perfectly as a perfect album, you know, like Led Zeppelin 4 and whatever. Engineering wise it's not so great sounding. It's not like a big in your face sound, it's a bit muffled, maybe a bit not very strong, not a big strong sound. I suspect that's to do with the cost of recording, in that nobody really knew they were back. No one at the record company was even listening to the stuff, so I suspect they just didn't have the money to spend on good equipment, I suspect, sadly. You know, Mob Rules sounds much better, even if it isn't as good an album, isn't it? Don't know. It sounds a hell of a lot better. It's big and crunchy. They had a lot more money. It's definitely one of those, if you haven't heard it albums, you know, you should hear it. Like a lot of albums around that particular time, there was a big, you know, when the media started pushing rock music again, it was worth these bands, let's make something really good, you know. Might be the definitive example of the Dio thing, maybe, or is it Stargazer, or I don't know. I think stylistically, I mean, the closest thing from a Dio perspective in his catalogue is probably Lock Up the Wolves, because it's not that heavy. It's really, really melodic. I think it's some of his best stuff. So there we go. Yes, Heaven and Hell. This is where I hand it to Sam, and Sam isn't here, and Sam doesn't like Dio. So let's go on. The tour was quite successful, and by that I mean the last tour, the previous tour, was quite successful. Yes, it was. And actually, Never Say Die started to sell, but apparently it took too long, and supposedly they were overshadowed by Van Halen, who were the support. What, really? Really? Yeah, apparently. But when Van Halen was new, it was new and it was shiny and it was shallow and fun and whatever it was. There is a bootleg Shockwave in Texas, sadly very much abridged. The sound is not fantastic, but it is a soundboard, and they're on fire. The live performance, forget the vocals, but the band performance at that point is better than the Heaven and Hell tour. Certainly with Vinny. I don't think I've heard any recordings with Bill on the tour, sadly. Or they're all recorded after he'd gone. Maybe that's the problem. And you have to remember they've been written off by the industry. Don Arden was involved again, finally getting the band he wanted all along since 1970. They were in a house in LA, much like Volume 4, with lots of drugs. The sounds of things. Dio wasn't interested in the drugs. Clever man. But you know, they were in such a terrible state with Ozzy still in the band that nothing was getting done. It wasn't going to happen. You know, and Tony was having to go to the record company and saying, you know, lie about, oh man, great new album. This one's much more commercial than the last one. No, this one's brilliant. They haven't done anything. And you know, and Don Arden was starting. I don't know if this was after Dio had come in, but Don Arden had lost faith in it, and furniture was disappearing. Remember, you have to remember ELO were huge at this point. They were massive with Don't Bring Me Down and all that stuff. However, we do know they had instrumental bits. Yeah, they had Children of the Sea, possibly the whole of Children of the Sea, pretty much, and we know they had at the very least the riff and the bass going for Lady Evil as well. So they had those two songs. Geezy was still there, you know. Ozzy wouldn't sing anything. Oh, I'm not singing on that. You know, and Ozzy had been very, very critical of Geezer's lyrics, refusing to sing some of his lyrics, and he had to change them and all that stuff. We don't think Ozzy sung at all, in that he wouldn't, don't do it. You know, basically wouldn't get up. He just lay down. So two things happened. We don't know what order this happened in, crucially, and we're only going on what they've said, you know. So Ozzy was sacked. That criticism of Ozzy being sacked for so many years, that it was such a terrible thing to do. Tony Iommi, the bad man, or sending Bill to tell him. But if he hadn't, there'd be no Sabbath and there'd be no Ozzy. You know, they were so much better apart. So Bill told him because he was his friend. and Tony had fallen out with him, so it'd be best. Tony shouldn't go and tell him. It's the sensible thing to do, actually. And that's the trust issue with Ozzy because he left the first time. It sounds reasonable to me. And now at the same time as this happening, Ozzy said, I knew Tony had met Dio, and I knew what was going down and what was coming down. What are you talking about, Oz? Tony only talked to Dio about forming a band, not Sabbath, forming a band, and he said, Tony and Bill, and Dio provides the keyboard player and bass player of his choice. Now, that's got to be before Geezer bailed, because Geezer was there when Dio actually went to meet Black Sabbath later on. So that does sound like they were aware Geezer wasn't completely on it, a bit disenchanted, a bit fed up, And it also explains why Dio kept telling Bob Daisy to hang around, because he's getting the band together. It's just that Tony decided he wasn't going to do that, and he just didn't tell Ronnie. He just didn't tell him. And there is another complexity in that Dio was working with these two guitarists whose name escaped me. Someone can probably comment that one. If not, I'll ask me and I'll put it in the comments as well. So it isn't quite as simple as that. So those, Ozzy was sacked. Tony was talking to Dio about forming a band with a different keyboard player and bass player. That doesn't sound like Sabbath. At some point, Tony decided to continue as Sabbath. David Coverdale was actually asked, and he was asked many times actually, but this time he was asked, and he just signed a deal with Whitesnake. That's the Ready and Willing era, so that's the best Whitesnake basically. So you can understand that as generic and whatever as it is. And he'd ask him again with Cozy a couple of years later, and the same thing had happened. That can't have been Sabbath. I mean, was that Sabbath? I mean, Coverdale singing Iron Man. That's even more absurd than Glenn Hughes singing Iron Man. But Glenn Hughes was also considered, because he's his friend, but not contacted. And again, you have to remember later on, I'll probably do that video at some point, but obviously Glenn wasn't offered the job of Black Sabbath at any point. He was just, suddenly he was in Black Sabbath all along. Oh no! there is footage of Glenn singing with Sabbath, some bootleg footage of a whole show. Glenn's not at his best, but it is fascinating. But that's another story. So that would have been the Geezerless Band. If it was Glenn, it'd have to be the Geezerless Band, not Black Sabbath. The other thing is that Robert Plant was considered. Now that seems bizarre, but you have to remember, you have to go back to what it was like then, and they were friends. They all come from around here, along with Bonzo and Trapeze. And from the perspective of what had just happened in Zepp, you can see that, But again, Iron Man, Robert Plant, no. But then again, I mean, Dave Walker. Would Dave Walker have sung Iron Man? Maybe they tried it and it just sounded ridiculous. I mean, Dio singing it is weird. Gillan singing it is bizarre. So, allegedly, Ronnie goes to the Rainbow Bar and Grill, which would make sense, obviously, because his previous band were named after the bar and grill. And bumped into Tony and Sharon. Yeah, Sharon, see, she was still there. They had a chat and, we've got this lovely studio we're working. Would you like to come and see the studio? Come and see us. So Ronnie gets there. Oh, listen to this song. Would you like to listen to this song? It's not a song, isn't it? What do you think? What would you sing over it? and so Children of the Sea was born. Pretty much written there and then, allegedly. And there you go. They never said join the band. They didn't say it was in the band. But it must have been pretty obvious when they came up with that one. Oh, this is a whole thing. This is a style. This fits. Perfect. Do that then. But Dio did say no. So he must have said no to a question. They must have actually, at some point, probably because he'd already been messed about when Tony just didn't tell him he wasn't doing his plan. And Dio said, well, no, you've got to make a decision. You've got to get it together and commit, one or the other. So, reading between the lines, it's probably more that they didn't really so much ask him as saying, oh, you're doing this now, aren't you? Am I? And then just not, Ozzy was still there in the building next door or something. But that was the thing that made Tony fire Ozzy, supposedly. Oh, okay, I've got to make a decision. Right, yeah, Ozzy's fired. Rang up Ronnie. I fired Ozzy. Are you still interested? Because by then, I mean, that song they made was so good, they can't get anything made with Ozzy. It must have been such an opportunity. So this 5-piece band with a rhythm guitarist, Jeff Nichols, started rehearsing. Okay, they're like rehearsing in the living room with little amps, so it's very writing-y and not very jamming-y, which is exactly what they need. That's when Geezer left. I believe that was for personal reasons, sorting out with his wife or something like that. I can't remember. Doesn't matter, does it? It's personal reasons, it's nothing to do with us. Geezer came back a bit later. Whether that return was because that was sorted, or was actually because he heard the material and thought, oh, no one knows, but he must have already heard Children of the Sea. So I don't know. Maybe, don't know. We'll probably never hear that definitively, particularly from Geezer, who's dodgy. He's dodgy Geezer. So Jeff Nichols switched to bass briefly, just for that moment, and then they got a bass player in, the original Rainbow bass player. Not Jimmy Bain, no. The original Rainbow bass player, the guy from Elf who's on the first album who didn't tour, Craig Gruber. Probably a sort of favour from Ronnie, really. He thought he'd been wronged. And the story goes he didn't fit in. The rumour is that he played on Die Young. He did not play on Die Young. There's no evidence of that. It doesn't fit into the timeline. It doesn't make sense. It sounds like Geezer. So no. And he basically too American was what they said. Ronnie is quite an Anglophile. So maybe Craig Gruber didn't know what they were talking about. Maybe he couldn't understand what they were saying. Like some people won't be able to understand what I'm saying right now. So Geezer came back, and now we have Black Sabbath, sort of, because the dynamics changed. Tony doesn't have quite so much control, you know? They've got this American with this huge amount of input, this huge amount of energy. He's writing all this fantastic stuff, writing the melodies, writing the lyrics. Geezer didn't want to write lyrics anymore, and supposedly they had that conversation where Geezer said, no, I don't do this anymore. But actually he's been put off from years of abuse from this fantastic lyrics. But otherwise it wouldn't have worked anyway, so that's kind of good that he didn't want to do it. And then Jeff ends up being sort of relegated and won't be writing, although actually he did write loads. And I suspect he wrote all the sound effects on Mob Rules, and we all know what that means. For one album of Magic it will work, but ultimately it meant it couldn't be a band because it wasn't a band. It had no structure of how they were going to do it. So Jeff Nichols is back on rhythm guitar. Supposedly they gave him a tiny little amp, and Tony had a great big amp, so they couldn't hear him. And then Ronnie and Bill were giving him the job, saying, "Sorry, it's not going to work. Didn't sound good." So was that a trap because they didn't want a rhythm guitarist, or not clear? So it's been suggested Ronnie didn't want a keyboard player in the band because of the Black Rainbow thing. So they put him on keys, but only for sound effects, and he's not allowed to be in the band, so they have to pretend he didn't write anything, and he has to sit behind the amps. That's why he was behind the amps some of the time, and then when Geezer wasn't in the band, he was actually in the band in the front or something. And actually, a lot of the backing vocals on here, might be why it sounds a bit different, are actually Jeff Nichols and not Dio, whereas later on Dio insisted on doing all the backing vocals himself. And the writing credits are Dio, Iommi, Butler, even for the songs that Geezer wasn't even there when they were written. We know Jeff Nichols wrote the thing from Heaven and Hell. We know that, at least. It's probably more about arrangements and things like that, I would think. So maybe, I mean, again, now I'm taking things away from Martin Birch, but maybe actually Jeff Nichols, it was almost like a producer, a very hands-on producer role of arranging things and things like that. They did have discussions about whether to call it Sabbath. Once they had the sort of 4+1 lineup, and Dio sat down and very seriously discussed re-recording the song Black Sabbath. That's fascinating. I mean, the fact that Dio sung War Pigs is also fascinating. But if I do a Live Evil video, I'll talk about that then. So once that was complete, they moved to Florida for the mixing. That's when Neon Nights was written. So Geezer was there for those first 3 tracks on the album. Sort of. So then all they need to do is play it to people. So it sounds like, to a certain extent, the marketing was easy. I mean, you only had to hear it. People didn't believe it was Sabbath. They recorded proper music videos, which are surprisingly not embarrassing. Dio's perfected his stage presence, etc. So I suppose it worked quite well. Whereas the previous album they did music videos, it's embarrassingly bad. And they had hit singles, but really the reason for that was the word of mouth. Live engineers at concerts were playing it to get the mix right, interestingly. So the concert goers were hearing it. What's this? It's Black Sabbath. What, really? So that they became very successful very quickly, which is a bad thing. And here it is. So yeah, at this moment in time, it's brilliant. So let's briefly go through the songs. We all know the songs, don't we? Come on. Neon Nights, the famous one, written at the end. Usually an encore. Initially, it was their opener, or played after War Pigs, but later on it became an encore for everybody. And a real testament. It's a good example of Dio's voice, because it is not easy to sing. It's one of those things where it's full head voice and it's right up there and it's full power. That's a Sabbath thing, and that's the only thing Dio and Ozzy have in common, actually, is that the fact that they have full head voice in the higher registers. It's a tremendously difficult song to sing. And remember, it's all about diction with Sabbath as well. I mean, later when they tried to get Americans in, other Americans, it didn't work because they wouldn't say the words in the same way, and you can't always hear what they're saying. But Neon Nights is a very good one. It's very much of its time. I suppose you have kids thinking it hasn't aged well, because it's not something you would hear at a Download festival or anything like that. But that's what I like about this album, actually. This is very much heavy rock, actually, and not very metal, which is better. Track 2 is Children of the Sea. Hugely influential song. Obviously, it's the first thing that came out of that creative spark. Again, always played all the time by everybody. I think massively influential, that one. It's a second track thing with the quiet and loud, but also that kind of mini epic, and you can do an epic in quite a small space. That's pretty cool. Lady Evil, the obligatory Dio's Evil Woman Look Out Tonight song on all his albums. Much lighter, quite a silly song in many respects. Controversial. That's Iomi, which he started doing around this time, is Ritchie Blackmore impression. Controversial. We all know who writes better riffs, but yeah, I think that's the thing. But obviously, what follows that, of course, is the title track, Heaven and Hell. What a song! I mean, the lyrics, the riff, the way that the vocal sections are done with that guitar, or just that bass line, and that you've got an epic ending and all that, and it's compressed into less than 6 minutes. That's amazing. It's such a good piece of music, so well written. I would like to hear what that original 8-minute version was like. Obviously, we've got loads of extended live versions, but most of them are just jamming, really, aren't they? You've got that whole extra Dio verse that you want to hear on Live Evil, actually. Although you don't want to hear everything on Live Evil, it's got to be said, but yeah. Okay, and then we turn the record over. We get Wishing Well, which is a strange thing to call a song, because there's a famous... Is it Bad Company, or is it Free? Is it Free or Bad Company? I can't remember, but they've got a song called Wishing Well, so it's a strange thing to call a song. And that's alright, and that's one of the songs where it is a good song, but it's not that good. If it was on Never Say Die, it would be like one of the really good ones. On this album, so it's interesting they put it there instead of Die Young. I would have put Die Young opening the next side, and then put Wishing Well and Walk Away. But it's probably at that point they don't really know what's good and what isn't, and that's why Martin Birch being there is so important. It's probably only later they look back and think, oh, that was good. Yeah. And then we have Die Young, which I think is one of the most underrated songs in the catalogue. Well, is it underrated? Probably is. The guitar intro, the riff, it's fast with a lot of the quiet fast section and all that. Really, really good. Track 7 is controversial. Walk Away. It's almost Def Leppard. Now, some people will think, what do you mean, how dare you? I mean really, really, really early Def Leppard, okay, which is still quite boring and poppy, but this is really quite poppy. You can see they haven't quite decided where this is going to go. It's not a million miles from Sensitive to Light, and it's certainly not as twee as Hard Road on Never Say Die. And finally, the final track is Lonely Is the Word, which is the most underrated song in the Dio catalogue, I think. I think it is fantastic. One of my favourite Dio performances, not technically particularly, just a fantastic Dio performance. And Tony Iommi's favourite guitar solo. Half the song is the guitar solo. I mean, it's fantastic. The winding down guitar solo ending into an album. Awesome song. If, you listen to this, but you're not really a Sabbath person or something like that, well, put on Heaven and Hell. You should listen to the title track. But yeah, listen to Lonely Is the Word. because it's really good. Thank you very much. See you soon.
Hello, I'm Johann Sebastian Bach. I thought I'd add this little fun bit as well about what's in my collection here. Never Say Die, like I said, the Shockwave in Texas bootleg, that's pretty good. I thought I'd point out the bootlegs I've got. Some of that stuff is now on the deluxe edition, but here we have some shows. So you've got, that's the Japan show from November. That's the one where Tony Iommi was ill, I think, and sort of collapsed on stage, because they end with Iron Man, and the last note is just a last note. It's just a single note, and it's not the da-da-da at the end of Iron Man, it's just duh. It sounds to me like he was ill, interestingly. But it's interesting, you know, the pro keeps going. That's an interesting one. I don't think it's as good as some of this stuff. 2 concerts from 1980, I don't know. They're short, so they are edits. I think some of that stuff is on the deluxe edition. That's the whole show. That's pretty cool. 27th of November. I'm pretty sure that one was the US though. So yeah, see you next time.